Hi everyone, thank you for joining us on a new interview of MMA Time. Today we have the privilege to be with Jeff Wagenheim. Hi Jeff.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Hi, fine. Thank you very much for being on the show. It's a real honor.
It's my honor as well. I'm very excited to be here.
So, you are a writer at the Washington Post. You write also for Sports Illustrated, and you are a regular cast on the MMA Beat with Luke Thomas, Ariel Elwani, and Chuck Min and all.
That's correct. Yeah.
And at first, we wanted to ask you a question about Sports Illustrated, but Sweb is gonna ask this one a bit later. I know that you used to be a Conor McGregor doubter. I am a fan of Conor McGregor, but given the news today and UFC 200, they said that they might make a Conor versus Nate number 2. I can get the marketing appeal for the UFC, but I have questions about the legitimacy, the relevancy of this event, and because Conor won't have defend his belt. What do you make of that?
I think what you just said is really the big question mark that I have, and a lot of people I think have. When I saw Ariel Helwani was the one who reported this today, and now it was not confirmed by the UFC, has not been announced by them. So, but Ariel's a good reporter, and usually when he reports something, he has good sources behind him. So I think we can assume that this is going to happen. And the reaction has not been very positive online. Now, people tend to be pretty negative online. That's just the way we are in this world. But I think that there's a reason to be negative about this one, with one exception. If Conor McGregor, you've seen Conor McGregor fight at 145 pounds, and the last couple times he's done that, you see him at the weigh-in, and he looks like a corpse. He looks like a skeleton, and it looks terrible. And now he's gone out and performed well afterward, but just thinking about what his body goes through in order to make that weight, I could imagine it's very difficult, especially in light of the fact that his last fight he didn't have to make weight. He had to make 170 pounds, which was easy for him. So perhaps he's seen the light and decided that I just can't make 145 pounds anymore. And if that's the case, then this fight probably makes a little more sense. I mean, the other option was for him to fight Rafael dos Anjos, the lightweight champion, and that was what the original intention last time was. And then it fell through because of dos Anjos' injury. I don't know that you could make that fight, because McGregor, before this was going to be a champion versus champion fight, but if you try to remake it now, you would be putting dos Anjos defending his title against a guy who lost to a fairly lowly ranked lightweight in Nate Díaz. Nate Díaz is probably ranked, I don't know the numbers, but I would guess in the lower end of the top 10. It wouldn't be right to give a guy who lost to him a title fight at lightweight. So now, if you've got McGregor can't make 145, that means no Frankie Edgar, no Jose Aldo. If he's already lost to Nate Díaz, that would mean, at least in my mind, no RDA fight. So where do you leave him? So the only, there are the limited options there. Nate Díaz was a big money fight, so I understand what they're doing. But unless it's accompanied by some explanation like what I just talked about, then I'm really against it. If Conor McGregor's intention is to fight this fight and still hold on to the 145-pound title, I think that featherweight belt is worth nothing.
So I have, because of what you said, I have three questions. First one, do you think that they will say, okay, you're no longer the featherweight champ?
Do I think they will? I think they should, but I think actually the proper thing would be for McGregor himself to vacate the belt. I don't think that he's for the UFC to say you are no longer the champ. That's the kind of thing that happens, like in Jon Jones' situation, where he did something wrong and he was being sanctioned. He was being punished by having the belt taken away. McGregor does not deserve to be punished and have the belt taken away by the UFC. But there should be a part of the agreement should be, okay, you will fight in the main event of UFC 200 against Nate Díaz, but as part of this agreement, you're going to vacate the belt. That is what I think should happen. That's not what you asked me. You asked me whether I think that will happen, and I hate to say it, but no, I don't think it'll happen. I think what's going to happen is the UFC is going to try to tell us that Conor McGregor is still the featherweight champion, and some people will buy it, but I'm not buying it.
And just the two last question on it. Do you think because of the reaction, UFC might change their position about this fight and say, okay, it's an interesting rematch, but not for now, let's wait a bit, if they see that people don't really want to see it again? And just a second question, it seems, given the outcome of the first fight, aren't they taking a huge risk if Conor loses again? Because we all saw that he was only human, and it's very hard to be unbeaten in this business. And what happens if he loses again against Nate? Sorry.
Okay, well, let's tackle those two questions separately. The first one about will the UFC look at the reaction and maybe change course? I'll throw it back at you. Do you think it's a good fight? Do you think this is the fight to make? No. Will you watch it?
Yes.
There you go. That is what the UFC is looking at. The UFC, the guys who work for the UFC, they're online right now. They're watching what's going on Twitter, and the reaction to this fight is, at least in my mind, is about 95%, if not more, negative. But everybody's talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. So by the time July works around, even though people like myself think this is the wrong fight, we're still talking about it, and the UFC knows that all that matters is if you can get people talking about it, then they'll watch. So that's the answer to your first question. I do not think they'll change course once they decide to do it. They have done that in the past. There have been times when that's happened, but I don't think that this is the case of that. I think they'll hold up. They'll keep the course. Now, the other question was, what happens if Conor loses again? Logic would say to me well, you lose two fights, that really dims your star power. But Conor McGregor seems to defy a lot of those things that we talk about. A lot of logic just seems to go away with him. He's never been afraid to take on a challenge, even a short notice challenge. And he's done very well. He's gone up and tried to fight in another weight class, and he wasn't successful, but he still got applauded for it. So he's already lost to Nate Díaz. If he fights Nate Díaz again and loses, I don't think it will be a shock. And I think that he's such a good talker that he will find a way to turn it around and say, okay, well, I guess I'm not a welterweight right now. I'm going back down to 145 and start beating people up again, and people will believe him. So I would say this. I would say that the star power in the bigger media, the outside of mixed martial arts, those people might start losing interest. In fact, I would say a lot of those people have already lost interest. They're here just to watch the big superstars, and as soon as they falter, they move on to other things.
Yeah,
McGregor, Ronda Rousey, whatever. But I think within the MMA fan base, no, I think that McGregor has proven star power, and I think he'll maintain that no matter what happens in this fight.
Yeah, but about that, you work at Sports Illustrated, right?
Yeah.
And you were talking about the star power of Ronda and Conor. How big of a deal is it for two UFC fighters to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated? Because Luke Thomas, we talked to Luke, and he said to us it was a very big deal in the States, but we cannot really appreciate it here in France because we know the magazine, but we don't have it, we don't read it. So how much of a big deal was it really?
Well, Sports Illustrated has been around for many, many decades. And in that entire history, and it's a weekly magazine, so it comes out every single week for many decades. In the entire history, only 3 times has MMA been on the cover. Actually, no, I guess it will be now 4 because Ronda's been on twice. She was, and McGregor's been on once. All that within the recent time. And then there was one time about 7 or 8 years ago when there was an article about mixed martial arts that made the cover. But that's it. And that article was more of a topics article. It was not about a particular fighter. So these two athletes making the cover of that magazine is a huge deal. It's a huge deal. It shows that the sport which kind of is over on the side of the sports scene here in this country, has started to infiltrate the mainstream. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you would consider similar in France, but I imagine that the biggest sport in France would be soccer, football, right?
Football, soccer. Yeah.
And there's probably some sports that only Frenchmen have a little appreciation for, and it doesn't really resonate with a bigger, wider audience.
Yeah.
In a way, that's mixed martial arts. So I mean, there are people in this country that a lot of people of my friends, a lot of contemporaries, do not have any regard for this sport at all. A lot of people, but every single one of them knows who Conor McGregor is. Every single one of them knows who Ronda Rousey is. They don't always know who Jon Jones is. They don't always know who Fabricio Verdum. You would think the heavyweight champion of the world, that'd be the biggest star in boxing history. That's always the big star. But no, it's these two stars. They're the ones.
And I have a question. Do you think it is because of Ariel Helwani said yesterday in the MMA Beat that they are making the Conor versus Nate Diaz fight, letting the possibility to have an event between Frankie Edgar and Conor in New York in November if it happens? Do you think that's because there is this possibility that UFC 300 is now a possibility of a rematch?
It's funny. I tend when Ariel states an opinion, I've learned that a lot of times he's stating an opinion not because he just thinks things up, but because he knows something. He's been talking about McGregor and Díaz rematch. He's been talking about that for a few weeks now, both on the MMA Beat and even when we've had lunch afterward. He's just talked a little bit about it, but he never really tells us. He's not even in private with when we're having conversation. He's not saying, "Well, I know this is going to happen," but you just know there's something going on inside of his head. He's talked to people who are close to it. I'm sure he's talked to both fighters' camps. I'm sure he's talked to some. He must have. I'm sure he has some sources within the UFC. So I would not be surprised if he has his finger on the pulse in that. It would make sense. I mean, as you probably know, next week there will be a vote in the state of New York that is expected to make MMA legal in New York, and which is the only state of the 50 states in the United States where MMA is not legal. And of course, the biggest arena, or not biggest in size, but the most famous arena in all of our country, Madison Square Garden, they're talking about having a big fight card in November. Now, if McGregor were to fight in July and come out of it uninjured, he would be ready, presumably, in November to fight. And Frankie Edgar does live just across the river in the fine state of New Jersey. So it would make sense for something like that to happen. And again, McGregor's such a good talker that even if he loses in July, and that's 2 straight losses to Nate Diaz, he has a way of talking his way around things and could still make it a big fight with Frankie. So if Ariel says it's they're going that way, I'm not going to.
They might actually do it. Yeah. And do you know personally Conor or Nate? Did you ever interview them or talk to them personally?
Yeah, I have. Actually, I've talked to both of them, but not. I guess I talked to Conor. Last time I talked to Conor was when he was fighting in Boston. One fight that he didn't finish. It was because he injured himself in that fight. But I talked to him lead up to that fight, and I've talked to Nate a couple of times after his fights. Both. I mean, I hate to be against this fight. I hate to be saying bad things about this fight because these guys are both excellent fighters, and I thought the first fight that they had some really great moments in it. I just feel like rematches are made for a reason. Rematches are when a champion loses a fight, and that champion, particularly one who's reigned for a while, a champion who has had that championship belt for a while, I feel like it's only right to give that champion a chance to regain it. A fight like this just seems like it's vanity. It seems like it's Conor McGregor lost the fight and he wants to regain whatever luster he lost to Nate Diaz. I just don't think that's a fight you make.
That was going to be my question, because just after Conor lost, John Kavanagh did a tweet quoting Samuel Beckett, the writer, saying, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. And do you think it is Conor that wants this fight to happen now because he's saying to himself, I won the first round and I shouldn't have lost this fight and I want to avenge as soon as possible this loss. And this is his vanity talking.
I think so. I mean, I think all fighters have a confidence that neither of you and myself, I don't think we can fully understand it. These guys, just think about it. I mean, if you've gone to fights and if you've been on the outside of a cage watching men or women compete inside there, could you just imagine yourself being in there with those people? I mean, these people are, it's a different breed of person, particularly when you get to that high level of sport. And even within that population, I think Conor McGregor is especially confident. I mean, you think about all the talking he does before a fight. Part of it is to get inside the head of his opponent and try to create questions or even create some kind of rage in the opponent so that opponent will not come at him in the most intelligent way. That's part of it. But the other part of it is he's talking himself into his own self-confidence. He's building himself up. And in the wake of his loss, even then he was talking about what he did wrong. You know, if you remember how he reacted to the loss, he talked about what he was doing wrong, and he had a very clear-headed, sober assessment of the fight right from the moment it ended. And that's pretty rare. Most guys, you know, you lose a big fight, you've been undefeated in the UFC, there's a certain despondency. Think about how Ronda Rousey lost and went into seclusion. McGregor didn't. He is a very confident man, and so he sees something, he sees himself fall, and all he wants to do is get right back up and go right back at the stumbling block, something that knocked him over. So I understand his impulse for wanting to do this. I just think that it's the wrong fight.
Okay. We wanted to talk about something else. The light heavyweight division. The picture is going to be completely different, or it's going to be more or less of the old picture, the night of the 23rd of April. Mm-hmm. We have Jon Jones fighting Daniel Cormier again for a rematch. And this is the most defining fight of the division, because if Jon Jones wins, he doesn't have any more fights, a real opponent, a real challenge in the division. Maybe a Rumble Johnson, maybe a rematch against Gus, but not a real challenge. But if he loses, it's the rebirth of that division that he cleared completely. So we wanted to know what do you think about the division, about the matchup coming up between Jon and DC, and that's it.
So what I think is I think you said it very well, and that's really it. It's a crossroads fight. The first time they fought, Jon Jones was on top of the world. He was essentially an undefeated champion. We know that he has a loss on his record, but we won't even go into that. It was a technicality, but he was on top of the world. Daniel Cormier was trying to reach up and get to that place, and he failed. Jon Jones won that fight pretty handily. But now, in the time since then, we've seen Jon Jones fall more because of his personal life, but it's also caused him to be away from fighting for a certain time. We've seen at the same time, Daniel Cormier has really built himself up and become really the champion. I mean, I think that a lot of us, you know, even in the Sports Illustrated rankings that I have Jon Jones as the number one light heavyweight, and that would, on the face of things, would seem like a dishonoring Daniel Cormier, but it's not. I think that Daniel Cormier has earned a spot toward the top of the sport, but it's hard to put him over Jon Jones considering the result of that first fight. However, in April 23rd, we will really see we'll see Jon Jones at a vulnerable place because he's been away from the sport and he's been battling his own personal life and he's had to change some things in his life, and we'll see Daniel Cormier at a higher place than he's ever been. So you're right. It is a really great crossroads, and I think that if Jon Jones finishes that fight, if he wins that fight in a very exciting way, and I would, yes, it's possible he could then go and fight Rumble Johnson. It's possible he would give Alexander Gustafsson a rematch, but it's also possible that he would go right up to the heavyweight division, build off of the momentum he has, and go right ahead and challenge the big boys.
I have just a question because I love the character of DC. I think he's real sympathetic, he's funny, and I always tell Sweb, I don't understand why, because I really thought that being the champ would give him a lot of confidence, and we watched together the press conference Unstoppable, and he was like a child. He was how do you say he was vexé.
Yeah. I don't have
Sorry,
it.
I'm searching for the word in English. The booze, the critics of the public and the booze, and how John reacts to him. You could feel that he was deeply hurt, and he was showing it. And a few days ago, and only a few days ago, Luke Rockhold said to the press that DC needs to stop showing his emotions to the public. Why do you think that no one, not only his coaches or teammates, did tell him that before? Don't show that you're strong. Show to John that he can hurt you.
He cannot hurt you.
He cannot hurt you.
I think it's probably a complicated question, really. First of all, to jump back to the where we began this whole conversation, Conor McGregor has changed the way this sport operates because of the way he talks. We've seen him ascend very quickly through the ranks to the top of the sport, and partly because he's a really good fighter, but in a large part because of the way he talks. And so we've started to see some other fighters who are not normally known as trash talkers. We've seen them start to talk a lot more, and we've also seen that it's not just to talk in order to promote a fight, but probably no fight more so than when McGregor defeated Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. That came about because Jose Aldo did not fight like Jose Aldo. He came charging across the cage. We've never seen him do that. And so, DC is a smart guy, and he sees a fighter who had not lost in 10 years come across the cage and fight not the way he normally does. So he thinks perhaps, well, I'm going to find a way to get into Jon Jones's head. I'm going to get Jon Jones because to fight not like Jon Jones. Jon has all the physical tools. He has all the physical advantages. He's taller. He's longer. If he wants to stay on the outside from DC, he can stay on the outside from DC. So what does DC do? One of the ways is to try to come at him, but another way is to see if he can get Jon Jones to come at him. And how do you get Jon Jones to come at you? But you try to piss him off. Pick at all his personal stuff. Talk about his drug abuse. Talk about this, all this stuff. That's what you do. So I understand where you're coming from. I think that there's the
difference between the two of them is that Jon Jones doesn't seem to be annoyed by the trash talking of DC, but when Jon Jones does it, because the public likes him and responds well to what he says, it seems like DC is feeling like a child who isn't loved by his parents. And so I have the feeling that he is losing on the mental warfare game.
I think you might be right. I think you're right. But put yourself in the position of Daniel Cormier. You've just gone out there and you've won this championship belt. And you've beaten a couple of pretty tough guys to get the belt and then to maintain that belt. And everywhere you go, are you looked at the same way that, say, Fabricio Verdum is looked at, or Luke Rockhold is looked at, or Conor McGregor, or Rafael dos Anjos, or any of those other champions? No. Not really. Every single one of those other champions is considered the champion. Every single one of them, right? There's not one of them who isn't considered the champion. I mean, I suppose you might look at Miesha Tate right now and say, she's lost pretty badly twice to Ronda Rousey, so perhaps there'll be some people who will. But Ronda Rousey did lose to the person that Miesha lost to, so there's certainly those circumstances make it different. Daniel Cormier is I think, in a unique situation. He's the champion, but he was beaten pretty soundly by the guy who used to be the champion. And so most people, myself included, look at Jon Jones, not Daniel Cormier, as the number one light heavyweight in the world. So that's got to get under your skin a little bit. That's got to get under your skin. And and you know it's hard to react to. And I think that also Daniel has had a history. This is something that has recurred even in wrestling. You know, he was in the Olympics, but he was not the gold medalist. I mean, not to disparage his great accomplishments, but there's always been somebody else who's ascended a little bit higher. Even though Cormier has had an amazing career, both as a collegiate and international wrestler, as a heavyweight mixed martial artist, and now as a light heavyweight mixed martial artist, his record has been tremendous. But there's always been that one person in each one of those places who's been a little bit higher. And right now it's got to be more frustrating than ever because Cormier is walking around with the belt. He should be hailed as the greatest light heavyweight in the world, but he's really not.
I have a question because I do remember something that really moved me. It's after his Gustafsson fight when he told the public, you made me a better fighter and you made me a better better human being. Sorry, and I felt it was the first time that he was letting himself to be the real Daniel Cormier, really likable, really outspoken, and I think he should always be like that, his true self, in order to be to win the public heart.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I think really what it comes down to for me is I think every fighter, every athlete really should be himself or herself. If you're Conor McGregor, it comes naturally to be the way you are, and I don't think Conor McGregor suddenly singing the praises of his upcoming opponent, that would just not be him. He does what he does because of that. It's natural for him. Right now, we're starting to see Frankie Edgar has gotten a little bit more, little trash talking. It's not really natural for him. I think you're right. I think Daniel Cormier is more of a nice guy. But we have a phrase here in this country that was coined by an old baseball manager named Leo DeRocher, and it was "nice guys finish last." And there's some truth to this. I mean, we look at Frankie Edgar. If Frankie Edgar were more of a trash talker and we're really calling McGregor a coward for not fighting him and really just kind of digging at him, maybe that fight would be happening. But he's a nice guy. Daniel Cormier has been a nice guy for a long time. Now he's trying on a different look. I don't think it really suits him. I think you're right. I think that I think that it's not really him. But I guess I can't really fault him for trying. I guess this is what he has to do in order to, in his mind, what he has to do in order to make this fight a big deal.
Okay, so last subject. You talked a bit about it in the last MMA Beat, and Ariel did a bit on it in the MMA Hour. Rory MAcDonald is gonna try the free agency, and Bellator just signed Matt Mitrione. I do think it's impossible for the UFC to let Rory go to Bellator because it would make no sense at all. And you made a good point yesterday saying that it reminded me. No problem.
Let me just turn this thing off. Sorry about that.
The UFC, to my feeling, would have exactly the same problem as boxing now. Too many belts, too many divisions. You don't know who is fighting who, when. So, is it just Rory trying to get a better salary and he's gonna get it because he put a bit of pressure on the UFC? Or is there a real chance, because Matt Mitrione went to Bellator and Benson Henderson also did it? Is there any chance or not at all?
I think there is a chance. Bellator is owned by a very, very wealthy corporation, Viacom, a big media company. Bellator can afford to pay a lot of money. I also think the UFC, I think if the UFC were to lose Rory MAcDonald, it would be the biggest loss that the UFC has had to Bellator. I mean, they've lost Benson Henderson, they've lost Matt Mitrione, they've lost
Phil Davis.
Phil Davis. They've had a few good fighters, but Rory MAcDonald, I mean, is at a different level in terms of his age and what he can bring in the future. So I think it would be a huge loss. And I think this puts, you mentioned I was talking about this on the MMA Beat yesterday, and I felt like we had a discussion about this, and my argument was and still is that this is not a good thing for the fans however, it is a good thing for the fighters. And so, as fans, if you're a fan of fighters, you kind of it's double-edged. On the one hand, you want your fighters that you really love to watch. You want them to be paid the most, and I would never try to stand in the way of fighters getting the money that they're due. It is absolutely, that's number one. However, if getting the most money means that Rory MAcDonald ends up in Bellator, and let's say 3 or 4 within the next year or two, 3 or 4 or 5 of the other top 5 challengers at different weight classes in the UFC go over to Bellator, then we have a fragmented sport where, at some point, Rory MAcDonald ends up being a Bellator champion, and at the same time, say Robbie Lawler is still the champion in the UFC, and we really love to see those guys go at it again, but we can't because there's a wall between Bellator and the UFC. So I think that when you mention boxing, so many of the greatest boxing matches in history have not been made, or if they've been made. Look at Mayweather against Pacquiao was made way too late in both men's careers. If that fight were made when both guys were in their prime, it would have been dynamite. It would have been a dynamite thing. And a lot of other fights just never get made. And MMA has a history of this as well. Back in the days when the Pride Fighting Championship was a big deal, particularly fighters in the heavyweight division. Fedor Emelianenko was the king of the heavyweights in Pride. And then the UFC had its heavyweights, Randy Couture and others who were reigning in this, and everybody would argue. And I know arguing in sports as amongst fans is a good thing. Oh no, Randy would beat Fedor. Oh no, Fedor would crush him. That can be a good thing, but isn't it better when you actually get to see the fights for real, not just getting to argue about it? So that was my point. My point is not to try to create a situation where fighters don't get paid. I really want the fighters to be paid as much as they possibly can, but as a fan, I want to see the best fights, and I think a fragmented sport might prevent that.
And wouldn't it be a huge blow and opening the Pandora's box? Because I do feel I come from box, not that I practice, but I used to really love box. And it seems now to me that it's like Latin. It's a dead sport. I don't want to insult a boxer or whatever, but for me, UFC is really dominant. If they lose a guy like Rory MAcDonald, not only you lose him, but you give ideas to all other fighters to say, okay, they might have a better check in the Bellator. What's not get over there? Would it be maybe the death of the UFC and the rise of Bellator?
Well, I don't know about the death, but it would certainly change the balance of power. The balance of power now, as you know, is the UFC is way up here. I mean, out of the camera angle here, and Bellator is way down here, out of camera angle, and it might actually pull them to a point where maybe the UFC is still, the UFC. I think it's hard for me to fathom the UFC being less than Bellator or even an equal. But if they're even within range of each other, that's a whole different look. And Bellator has been trying to in recent history, since Scott Coker took over, they've been trying to draw its ratings by having all these crazy fights. Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock, guys who were like about my age. These are not people that should be still competing, but there are a lot of people who will turn on the TV and watch that happen. And that's how they get their ratings. If they were to shift gears a little bit and say, no, from now on, we're going to get the best, we're going to try to be the place where the best fighters in the world are. And that's a claim that only the UFC can make right now. If Bellator can say, no, we're going to be the one that's going to have the best fighters, and then these two organizations are competing, and each of them has, say the UFC has 60% of the best fighters and Bellator has 40%, that is going to mean that a lot of fights that you would like to see and I would like to see will never happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's do a quick Q&A if you agree.
All right, quick Q&A.
Okay, I'll shoot the first one.
Why ask the questions? You guys ask the questions.
No problem. We can do it.
We can do it. But we ask the questions. So what's your favorite combat movie?
My favorite combat movie? Oh, boy.
It can be a Scorsese, Raging Bull, or Rocky, or Van Damme.
I think Raging Bull was probably the one. I think that was the one. I also like The Wrestler. I think with Mickey Rourke. I mean, I guess I'm not
a few years ago, yeah.
Not sure if you consider pro wrestling to be combat, but
But still, yeah. You know,
it's not that big here than in the US.
If we're going to take it even farther, and if we do count pro wrestling, then my breakfast with Blassie, which was the great Andy Kaufman, the great comedian Andy Kaufman, having breakfast with classy Freddie Blassie, the former pro wrestler. It's a sleeper. If you ever get a chance to see that,
we didn't.
Jim Carrey did a movie on him.
Aha! There you go. That's
I saw the movie with Jim Carrey, but not the one you are speaking about.
Absolutely good stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, so if you had been a fighter, what would be your entrance song?
Oh, my entrance song. It would probably be, mine would. I will say this: whenever I'm listening and Johnny Cash music comes on, so it might be one of those Johnny Cash songs. I grew up in New Jersey, just like Frankie Edgar and Jim Miller, and so if you grew up in New Jersey, you may not know this, but it is actually the law. You have to be a Bruce Springsteen fan. So I grew up as a very big fan of the Boss. So it might be a Bruce Springsteen song, although I'm not sure which one it would be. It would probably be one of his or a Johnny Cash song.
Johnny Cash, The Man Comes Around, could be a good one.
Yeah.
Good choice. And still picturing yourself as a fighter, where would you want to train? In which camp, in which gym would you want to train?
Wow, I think there's some pretty good ones out there. The gym that I've always kind of had an affinity for, I think, is Jackson Winklejohn. I think that I love the cerebral, the brainy approach of Greg Jackson. I could watch nothing but instead of watching fight highlights, I could watch nothing but Greg Jackson spending 1 minute in the corner with his fighter between rounds. I could watch a string of just that because I just love the way he approaches a fighter and the psychology that he uses, and also physiology, the way he insists on his fighter, getting his or her breath and breathing better and just settling them down. I just love that. So I think that if I were fighting, I would probably want him to be the guy who was training me. Yeah.
So not that you've trained at Jackson Wink gym, if you had to be a fighter, Jeff Wagenheim would prefer to fight in Bellator against Ken Shamrock because he's 50 years old, or would you rather fight someone in the UFC if you had the chance?
Oh yeah, no, I want the heavyweight champion. I mean, I've been losing weight lately, so I've gone from the heavyweight to I might be able to get down to 205 and take on Johnny Bones, or you know what? I'm going to say it. I'm down to the point where I could probably cut to 205. So I want the Johnny Bones Daniel Cormier winner. I want.
You can go on Twitter and say it.
Okay, let's call him out.
I got it. I'm taking it.
And as a matchmaker, which fight would you want to see? The dream matchup.
Well, I guess I want to see Jon Jones fight at heavyweight. I want to see. He's had this tremendous physical advantage over everybody he's fought, and I don't begrudge him that. I think that he's so tall and so long that it's really hard to get at him, and I want to see what he does when he fights against guys who are bigger than him, and I think he would do pretty well. So it's not that I want to see. It's not that I'm hoping to see his demise. I actually think that he would. I think he would give a fight. I think I would love to see him fighting not one of the big monster heavyweights, but like a Velasquez or Verdum or somebody who usually fights at around the 230s or low 240s. I think that a guy like Johnny Bones would be a fun fight for one of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so last question: do you think that one day MMA and UFC will overcome football and NBA in the US? Because we know that now I think it's the third or fourth sports in the US. Do you think that one day it will continue to grow?
I don't think it'll grow like that. No, I think the only thing that football, that American football has against it right now is because we're starting to focus so much attention on concussions. There's a lot more attention being paid, and like I have two kids. One, my son is 13, and I'm not letting him play football. I let him play soccer, and he goes skiing. So he does things that you might consider, that definitely could take your toll physically on you. But football, I think, is a sport that there's just too much concussion, too much clashing of people. Now, the thing is, though, if football starts to come down, because of that. Well, so is MMA then, because
Yeah.
MMA is a sport that causes just as much. You know, American football is just so much in our culture right now, and it's just it's hard to imagine even baseball or basketball approaching it. MMA has an audience, but it's still a sport that is a little too brutal, too kind of nakedly brutal. I mean, the brutality of football is covered up with all the helmets and all the pads, but here's these two guys stripped down to nothing but shorts going out and beating each other up. I think there's a lot of people in the public, the sporting public, who are just not going to accept that, and they're not going to embrace that. And so, no, I don't think MMA. I think MMA can grow, but not to that place.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. For people, they can follow you.
Who are you guys going to fight?
Me?
Yeah.
Personally, I love Stephen Thompson because I love spectacular fights. I don't say that I would be spectacular, but he could be me in a spectacular manner.
I want the money fight. I want Conor McGregor.
Okay, well, I'll see if I can get him to. I'll next time I see McGregor, I'll make sure I tell him somebody in Paris who has said that he,
Two Frenchmen are looking for him.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, we are looking for it.
Thank you very much, Jeff. It was a real pleasure.
I love
Everyone,
it.
they can follow you, Jeff Wagenheim on Twitter.
Jeff
You
Wagenheim.
are every Thursdays on the MMA Beat, and of course Washington Post and Sports Illustrated if they want to read you. They say on your profile that you don't like violence, but that you are very violent in a car.
That's right. If I'm driving, don't cut me off because I
Road rage.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Jeff.
Jeff.
It was an honor.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye. Bye.